For the past few days now, I've been interviewing my different friends, different acquaintances, and I've been asking, what do you think about climate change? The initiation of this project was actually to see different backgrounds, different schools and how they influence you politically. But I actually came to the conclusion that this is much greater than that. Us as millennials actually have a huge influence on today's political aspects. We can actually be a change if we use our voice to actually portray what we actually think. So, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about climate change? Do you think the government should get involved? If so, then explain your answer. Do you think Trump is doing the right thing by opting out of the Paris Agreement? And last but not least, this question actually may change depending on who answered. But the question was, do you think we as citizens can change political aspects? But since it's people from different countries, from different schools, from different states, from different places, they're not all citizens, but they do have a say in our political government.
Climate change is evident and true, and we need to do something about it. To me, climate change is the destruction of our planet and ourselves, and it can be proven through many different metrics, reflecting how temperatures have risen due to an increasing amount of CO2 stuck in our planet's atmosphere. This brings many disastrous consequences to our planet. We need to learn how to have a symbiotic relationship with Mother Earth. We need to shift our perspective as humankind and realize that climate change is real and we need to act soon. We need to develop policies and let state and private businesses work together in order to ensure sustainable development and the preservation of nature. I believe the government should definitely get involved. However, they must be cautious in the process. Nowadays, coal and many other non-renewable energy sources provide millions of jobs both in the States and worldwide. The global economy could be endangered if change is done drastically. I believe the government should establish clear rules on the matter and commit to making them work. Therefore, I believe countries committing to change their energy matrices through agreements such as the COP21 signed in Paris is actually a good thing. This kind of agreements brings along different positive things which constitute the how, and these are actions such as developing a clear framework for carbon trading, organizing auctions for renewable energy sources, and promoting incentives within the renewables industry for businesses to compete in an environment that serves ourselves and our planet. Also, I believe that schools, with the government support, should teach children about climate change, therefore preparing the citizens of tomorrow from a young age to take care of our world. I disagree with President Trump's decision. He's focusing, I think, only on short-term gain. By opting out of the Paris Agreement, he is of course supporting an industry that gives jobs to millions of Americans. That is a fact. He said it in his campaign that his presidency would be oriented towards helping the average American worker. But what is also a fact is that Trump is the proof that some commercial objectives will end up destroying a world that needs prompt action to achieve long-term effects. When it comes to climate change, the first generation barely heard about it. The generation after it wondered how to tackle the issue, but sadly, the generation after our generation will be left to deal with the terrific consequences of climate change. How much is the United States missing by opting out? How much scientific talent will be wasted? How much more pollution will we add to our planet's atmosphere? What about the jobs of the future? The solar power industry, for example, already employs twice as many people as coal does, and the trend will just keep going. Do you really want to make America great again? Start by setting the pillars to a sustainable future.
Okay, so my opinion on climate change. I think that a lot of people will argue that climate change is not a real issue, but it has been scientifically and statistically proven that climate has, like that this emissions have contributed a lot the CO2 emissions have contributed a lot to this greenhouse effect. We can see it in these like the hurricanes that have been happening, these El Nino effect and these La Nina effects and all this. I will leave all that complicated talk to the experts. But yes, climate change is an issue, and I definitely think that the reduction of CO2 emissions will, um, if anything, have a good impact on our planet. Um, Now, should the government be involved? Is it a bad enough issue where the government should be involved? And yes, the government should definitely be involved, but I do not think there's two ways that the government can be involved in this. There's one is through punishment. They can have fees to these big corporations of how much CO2 emissions they can emit and all that stuff. Pretty much like a speeding ticket, but for carbon emissions. And that's one option. Another option, which is a very innovative option, is this whole talk about this carbon tax and this pricing on carbon. And the idea behind that is that you would implement any products made or any energy, like the electricity or anything implemented like that has to do with the downstream effect of energy production. So all those products would have a carbon tax. They would be based with a carbon tax. So the price will be reflected onto the consumer. Therefore, the consumers, people that buy these products, they won't be as cheap. So they will be more costly to produce. So that way they can more fairly compete with products that are produced with alternative energies such as solar power or wind power, stuff like that. So it was kind of like evening the playing fields here. Another innovative idea around this model is this whole idea on capping these emissions on. So say a big corporation would have a cap on how many emissions they can produce, and if they want to go over that cap, they would have to buy a permit from the government, and those permits would be limited, and they could be traded with other companies. So you could trade the amount of emissions that you are allowed to have with other nations, with nations that don't emit as many emissions. That way, there's more of like as if it kind of like if they were stocks in a stock market. You could trade carbon, and those ideas are very innovative, and I support them very much because as I'm an economics student, I'm studying economics, and this invisible hand principle is much more efficient. It has been statistically proven in many studies that it's much more efficient when you leave it up to people to in their incentives to solve issues instead of punishing them. And that leads on to this Paris Agreement. So I definitely agree with Trump that the United States should not that this Paris Agreement is not a good idea.
My opinion is that we as people must get involved in the process of recycling, using cars with more people, not just for ourselves, so that can have an effect in the way that the pollution in our countries affect us. So we must start by telling our governments to get involved in making laws that can help us, that will reduce the amount of gases that are released into the atmosphere. And something really bad that just happened is that Trump got out from the Paris Agreement. I think that was one of the worst mistakes that he has made in his presidency. So I think that America should push so that he goes back into the agreement and goes back helping the world to be better. Uh, we as citizens of the world, not just America, should I don't know, make campaigns, start recycling more, make a bigger consciousness of what is affecting our countries, our world, the places we live in, the animals that live with us too. So I think that we are a very important key in the fight against contamination.